Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. On behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for our annual OTCQX Best 50 Conference. Our next live presentation is from BTQ Technologies. Please note you can submit questions for Nicholas in the box to the left of the slides. And at this point, I'm very pleased to welcome him. Our next presenter is Nicholas Russi-Newton, co-founder and chief operating officer of BTQ Technologies, which trades on the OTCQX Best Market under the symbol BTQQF and on the CBOE Canadian Exchange under the symbol BTQ. Welcome back, Nicholas.
Thanks, John. Great to be here. Nick from BTQ Technologies, and it's quite an exciting time, having worked in quantum for the past decade, to see so much mainstream attention in the space. And I do think there is a bit of a disconnect, though. I just spent a few weeks in Australia visiting our office there and attending the Quantum Australia conference. And when you speak with the researchers who work at the various quantum companies, there is a disconnect in terms of what corporate executives are claiming and promising as it relates to the capabilities and problems you can solve with quantum computers. So I think areas like quantum chemistry or quantum AI and other things like that, while very interesting area of research, those ideas are at least a decade out from commercial viability. So I think what excites me about where we're going with BTQ is that we've had this, realistic view of what these computers can do, and we've, identified, near-term opportunities, that have, opportunities to commercialize within the next 12, 18, 24 months. So I think that makes, BTQ quite unique in that regard. Quantum computing is a very exciting space. I think a lot of investors are looking for exposure, and how do they identify which companies to back? And BTQ, we want to enable exposure to all the most exciting near-term opportunities within quantum computing, because quantum, you still, there's a lot of companies, hundreds now. Most are private. So, there's very few ways to actually get exposure to this space. And, in addition, you're hearing, news almost every day out of whether it's, governments, just being in Australia, the Australian government has allocated $1 billion to a single company there, PsiQuantum. And then you have companies like Microsoft and Google and others that are all developing quantum computing related hardware and other aspects of this. And this fundamental research goes back decades. So, in Canada, we're a Canadian company. Universities here, University of Waterloo, they've been, looking at quantum, researching quantum for decades. So, there's good reason to want exposure to this, really exciting technology. So one of the implications of quantum computing is that, all of our cryptographic infrastructure that we've been using on the internet for the past 40 years is at risk. So, today we're using RSA-based cryptography. This was invented at MIT decades ago. That's vulnerable to exponentially faster quantum computers. That was kind of discovered in 1994 by this guy by the name of Peter Shor, who, theoretically demonstrated with a quantum algorithm. Quantum computer didn't exist at the time, but he theoretically demonstrated that you could run Shor's algorithm with a large enough quantum computer with enough stable qubits, to break large numbers down into their prime factors. So, That was a huge catalyst for the space and for the commercialization of the space. And now you have governments globally, led by the US and the standards agency there, NIST, which has been looking at how do we secure cryptography in the quantum age. So they've introduced PQC, or post-quantum cryptography. And there's a difference between post-quantum cryptography and quantum cryptography. So PQC, this is classical algorithms, on classical hardware that work on today's internet infrastructure. The algorithms are just designed in a way where they have no known, quantum attack vectors. So quantum cryptography, you're actually using quantum hardware. You'll need dedicated fiber. It's very expensive. There's distance limitations. If you're, using satellites, the clouds will interfere with that. So quantum cryptography is not ready for prime time, even if it has greater security guarantees than classical cryptography. There's potentially foreign adversaries out there that are just harvesting all of this data that we use on the internet today, and they'll just decrypt that when they have a working quantum computer. This is very important, especially as it relates to hardware, because hardware being shipped today, that'll be in the field for X number of years. And that's a potential threat if you're deploying that in terms of it being compromised by a quantum adversary. So you have a number of companies. They're all now transitioning to post-quantum cryptography. So I think a lot of the CDNs like Cloudflare and Google and others have already implemented post-quantum cryptography in one way, shape, or form. So you're potentially already using PQC on your various devices. You might just not know it. So this can be implemented in software, and you have like blockchain networks now. They're all looking at how do they implement PQC, which is pretty tricky for blockchain. Standards agencies weren't that concerned with that use case. And cryptography is not something you can rush. We know cryptography is secure because it stands the test of time, right? It goes years or even decades without being broken, and that's how the community has confidence that these systems are secure. So I think there's a real threat that digital assets won't transition in time. So I think that's why you're seeing so much focus in that space. So as it relates to specific use cases, I spent a bit of time in Taiwan, and we still have an office there. And we are looking at how to run these new standards within hardware, within semiconductors, because they have different mathematical foundations. They're much larger in size. So we look to develop a post-quantum first architecture that can run post-quantum cryptography very efficiently, which isn't an obvious problem because the cryptography we're using today is very efficient, and people love, it is a bit of a religion, so people are hesitant to switch off of it. But we recognize the resource requirements of these new algorithms that were going to be standardized, which are now standardized as of last summer. So we do need to run these efficiently on mobile devices, in data centers, and other mission critical applications, where current hardware just won't be able to compute these algorithms, because these algorithms, what underpins them is this technique known as NTT, or theoretic transforms, which are very difficult to compute. And in addition to that, we're gonna transitioning to new cryptographic standards is going to take some time. So typically these types of transitions take a decade. So during that time, hardware is going to have to support multiple different algorithms, some that are pre-quantum, some that are post-quantum, and it'll kind of be a gradual transition kind of over the next 10 years. So you need to pack a lot of algorithms in this type of architecture. So how do we do that? How do we build something that's area efficient enough to support all these new standards? So that's why at BTQ, we've been looking at processing and memory, and this is an architecture that has never been deployed, in a cryptographic context, at scale. It's been used a lot in artificial intelligence. And actually, the company that we acquired, Radical Semiconductor, the team there was a bunch of Stanford AI chip designers. So they were looking at how do they apply processing and memory for AI compute, which I think is still seen as a very credible way to build AI chips that are extremely efficient. But it is challenging because in AI, you still have this problem of there being new LLMs that are introduced almost every day, whether it's DeepSeek or Facebook. So it's hard. It's when you're designing chips, it's pretty complex to hit a moving target. How do you kind of choose which paradigm to approach, and but that's where cryptography, you don't necessarily have that problem because standards take a long time to make, and then they're put in place for years. So that's something where you can kind of make a really compelling product based on a standard that won't change, and then customers can have confidence in. And the benefits of us, so we saw this trend. I think if you spend time in Taiwan, it's a good way to essentially front run what's going on in cutting edge semiconductor technologies, because they're very forward thinking. They're the best in the world in that. And I remember I had lunch years ago with the CTO of ITRI, and ITRI is the government lab in Hsinchu, which is just an hour south of Taipei. And ITRI is responsible for incubating most large semiconductor companies. So TSMC, spun out of ITRI, UMC. And when I was speaking to him, and in terms of what his priorities are, he said it was, my life goal is to efficiently compute like NTT, for applications in cryptography, whether that's lattice-based cryptography or, homomorphic encryption or zero-knowledge proofs. These are all primitives that are based on NTT as well. And I thought that was very interesting. He was, and we were working with ITRI. I think they also were applying this to AI, and they thought applying this to post-quantum cryptography was very compelling. And that's when we started getting very aggressive in terms of other IP acquisition. So acquiring Radical, which took a couple of years to close. We acquired another company out of a small company in Taiwan earlier this year that was also working on this. And there's not really anyone else I think people are catching on to this, but we have an IP moat now. We have a product offering that we're very excited about. So I think what's unique about this architecture and how we're planning to go to market with it is that every chip company out there is now looking into post-quantum cryptography. Every AI chip company, is going to be looking into this, and they'll need something that's extremely energy efficient and also area efficient. So in terms of taking less physical size on chip. And so this is where the cache architecture is very compelling in terms of us being able to license this technology to these existing chips. So we're not going to be going out to every bank in the world that has hardware security modules. We're not going to be going out to every telecom company. We're going to be going to these individual chip companies or licensing channels and licensing our software IP that can be included in these chip designs into a real product. So we have a number of partnerships that we've already announced, which we're very fortunate of, which I can touch on later in the presentation. And we've actually demonstrated this technology. So we have a smart card prototype of this, and I think smart card is a very interesting use case. So think of the chip on your credit card. This is something where significant resource requirements there to implement post-quantum cryptography into a form factor like that. So that's something where every company that's developing smart cards, credit cards is going to be looking at post-quantum versions of that. And as it relates to processing in memory, so not only is this very good for lattice-based US government standardized cryptography, but there's now we've seen a bit of a renaissance in cryptography. This is a bit thanks to blockchain. Blockchain incentivizes very cutting-edge cryptography research. But then you're seeing that get deployed in traditional industry. So I think one interesting application that we're looking at is homomorphic encryption. So as we enter into the age of AI, and now everyone's using ChatGPT and OpenAI, we're of course giving all of our data to these companies. And there's going to be privacy concerns, compliance concerns around that. So you can use techniques like homomorphic encryption, which enables companies to do computation on encrypted data. Now, this is very expensive. You'll need some very efficient hardware, but that's another application that's based on this NTT, which our hardware is uniquely capable of. So that's an area we could develop a dedicated homomorphic encryption chip with our technology, or license into companies that are developing chips like that. So we've benchmarked our chips. We've done actual tape outs of our technology with foundries in Taiwan. So we have, to our knowledge, the best performance by far than any other competitor that's looking at post-quantum cryptography acceleration. So we're excited to publish more on this, and you'll be seeing some research papers and other things going live in the near future. So yeah, so that's what we've been looking at in terms of PQC and classical cryptography, but to secure against quantum attacks. But meanwhile, we've also been doing a lot of research on finding the killer applications for quantum computers, so actual quantum devices using quantum mechanics, qubits. Are there other applications outside of factoring Shor's algorithm? That's 10 years away. So that's why we started working about a long time ago now with Professor Brennan, who's director of quantum engineering at Macquarie University, recently joined BTQ full-time. He's very revered in the space, but he hasn't had too much attention. But there's only a few ways to build quantum computers, And I think right now, in terms of the performance, this approach known as neutral atom quantum computing is in the lead. So Gavin co-invented that technology 20 years ago. And this is why we recently partnered with QPerfect. So this is a company in Strasbourg in France, spun out of the university there. And we've announced an investment and an option to acquire them. And they are building neutral atom quantum computers. And they have the leading emulator currently in the world. So if you want to, like, if you're trying to build a quantum computer, or if you're trying to test quantum algorithms, you're going to want to use QPerfect's cloud-based emulator to test these various environments. And neutral atom is interesting for a number of different reasons. So superconducting is the approach that Google has been working on, and I think that really captured a lot of people's imagination in December when they launched or when they announced a breakthrough in terms of scaling those types of computers. And they announced, we're entering into the multiverse, and credit to their PR team for spinning that. But so neutral atom, the benefits are just one, I think, is the power consumption. So you don't need refrigeration like superconducting does, and you can use just ultra efficient lasers. And if you look at the actual number of qubits you can fit on a chip or on an individual module, we're talking tens of thousands. And qubits, if we're going to run useful algorithms, we're going to need a certain number of qubits with a certain level of quality, measurement quality for those qubits. And you're going to have these modules interconnected. So the actual numbers that you can fit on each module is extremely important. So both measurement quality, qubits per module, neutral atom is far ahead. And in terms of speed, we are, I think, seeing recent experiments that show neutral atom is catching up. And those are not in the current most recent DARPA benchmark study by the US government. So if anyone has been looking at those numbers, they need to be updated to some of the speed numbers need to be updated in terms of some of the recent experiments. So yeah, I think, just my experience and, being at this conference, Quantum Australia conference a couple of weeks ago, is there's just a lot of excitement in neutral atom. So we're the only public company that's looking at this. And then, you're seeing a lot of attention as well, though, on superconducting and photonic approaches. But ultimately, this is a winner take all. I think there's going to be one modality that wins this race. And so that's why we're very excited about our partnership with QPerfect and continuing our research with them, where we're going to be exploring some interesting near-term applications that our algorithms team has been working on, which we can then pair with their hardware, quantum hardware expertise. And one very interesting application, which would only take tens of thousands of qubits. So I think the roadmap for neutral atom is this is potentially achievable in the next 2 to 3 years. And the application there is using these neutral atom devices within cryptography to create unique kinds of cryptographic keys and digital signatures. So the idea is you would use, so in the cryptographic key generation process, you would use a quantum device for that, where you could harness unique quantum properties like the no cloning theorem, which enables you, like in classical information, that can be duplicated very easily. But quantum states, there's these unique properties which could then be deployed over the existing internet. So you'd have this interesting hybrid type, quantum classical application. And you've seen, and there's a lot of exciting use cases for this. And I think if you just look at blockchain, like what they've been trying to achieve over the past decade, building this massive distributed network, is to prevent things like double spending. So keeping everyone on a ledger, knowing the balance, and you have computers all over the world ensuring that the ledger is updated, because information can be duplicated, and people would want to kind of steal funds and represent changes in value. So with quantum and these what's called these one-shot signatures, which was introduced by a team out of Princeton just 4 or 5 years ago. So it's a new idea. But what's exciting is that you could use this to sign a message once, and that could be used for transfer of value, or for database signing, or in blockchain in terms of representing ownership. So it could be done a lot more efficiently than building a large-scale, massive, distributed network. So I think you are seeing a lot of exciting applications in just core internet infrastructure for this. And I think this would be, this is only gonna, this, one-shot signature, research area is now, tons of people are working on it, proving the performance of them, and you're going to see a lot more exciting, use cases emerge for this. So another application that our algorithm team devised is just a quantum analog to proof of work. So there's NISQ era hardware out there by quantum computers. So this is quantum computers that are available today with just hundreds of qubits, where you could actually use them to perform proof of work, blockchain consensus validation, in a way that's vastly more energy efficient than classical proof of work. So this is an exciting area of research. We published multiple papers on this, and we've actually built a prototype. So we achieve 1000x in terms of energy performance over existing approaches. So this is another area within cryptography that is very exciting, and I think quantum is a new platform, so there's going to be ideas that we don't currently look at today. Similar to how when you had we didn't envision Uber before we had the iPhone. There's going to be new applications that emerge, and I think finance, digital finance, blockchain is an area where there's going to be a lot of innovation. Because that's how this entire field of quantum information started. Back in the 80s, there were these two guys, so Gilles Brassard, Canadian guy, and Charles Bennett, American guy who was at IBM for years. They famously met on a beach in Puerto Rico, and they were both thinking about quantum money and unclonable banknotes. And this was after this paper was published by Stephen Weisner, who was a complete amateur. He was an academic that talked about, kind of using the no cloning theorem to make quantum banknotes, quantum money. So money that couldn't be reproduced was, and so they met and they came up with the BB84 protocol, which forms the basis of quantum key distribution. And quantum key distribution is this very secure method of, cryptographic key generation and security, which is used today in certain use cases. So, it's being used by the Swiss government to secure the election. And there's now been, a number of companies like our partner at IDQ that has developed hardware to support like quantum key distribution. Now it's not it's still not very feasible because it doesn't work very well over the existing internet. But what I was just discussing, quantum proof of work, one-shot signatures, is these are very exciting approaches that could work over the existing internet and enable these certain quantum guarantees of trust and assurance. And I think you're going to only see more develop in this in this area. So we've been working with a number of partners. How we hire our research talent is we have partnerships with leading universities like University of Waterloo here in Canada, which is national asset and is the top quantum related institution in the world. So we're excited to be working with them. And in tandem, we've been working with large companies like Foxconn and IDQ that are also interested in cutting edge quantum research. And we're looking at other various channels like that to license or commercialize our technology into. And yeah, we're very excited about the ecosystem in Australia. I think Australia is going to play a very important role as it relates to the commercialization of this space. Australia had the benefit of their previous chief scientist being a quantum physicist. So there's been a lot of investment over decades there. And I think Australia just attracts a type of quantum researcher. Perhaps it's closer to nature or what have you, but it's just, you have all the top talent there. A lot of the top quantum computing companies, even if they're not Australian companies, are started by Australian founders. So that's why we've set up a subsidiary there, just moved into a larger office, and we've hired Gavin full time. And there's very few people like Gavin. I think at his level in terms of quantum error correction experts, we're talking hundreds in the world. And there's also few, like not every quantum physicist can actually work in a commercial setting. So that's something where we've seen a lot of outreach to BTQ in terms of potential hires because they like the research we're doing and that we're kind of core to the true mission of quantum development and research. Yeah, just as relates to our commercialization plans and where we are today. So we've been listed now for a couple of years. We've been working on our NASDAQ application stateside. We're also looking at other venues, where we have a presence in addition to NASDAQ. And we think in terms of, the first half of my presentation regarding licensing opportunities for PQC, hardware implementations, I think, the standards kicked in less than a year ago from the US government. And a lot of companies now are looking for solutions ahead of next year, and they're going to have to start working on them, over the summer. So I think, we're going to be very busy, doing outreach to these potential customers, large chip companies that want to support our technology in their designs, and engage in licensing, contracts. So, that's what we're very focused on. And in addition, we're very excited about ensuring our partnership with QPerfect. We see that as, in terms of, very few companies out there that are early stage. QPerfect hasn't received any institutional capital yet. They have a couple competitors. They're all multi-billion-dollar companies. So I think, we're in a great spot where we can really, develop their IP. They have a very exciting IP foundation there. They have a real-world product that leading companies like QERA are using. So we're just, very excited about the year ahead. So with that, happy to take any Q&A. What's the status of the NASDAQ uplisting? So yeah, working on that full out. We put the application in earlier this year. So I think there's appetite stateside for quantum related names. So that process is ongoing. What was the rationale for acquiring Radical Semiconductor? Yeah, so we were working on processing and memory technology for PQC with ITRI, Research Institute in Taiwan. And there was only one other company in the world that I found that was also working on this. So I was talking to Radical for a couple years, and kind of hard to get a hold of. I ended up just having to travel down to see them at their office in Pasadena. It was last April, a year ago, and met them. Kind of amazing. It was kind of like the Stanford dream team. You had Zach, co-founder, who I think is considered one of the top AI chip designers in the world. You had his co-founder Sean, who's a quantum physics PhD, who was running the business, and they attracted some amazing talent. So Anne spent a decade working at Intel, who on the post-quantum cryptography standardization process there. And they had a compelling product offering that was highly synergistic with what we were working on. I think we essentially agreed to terms in the first meeting and papered up the deal. Commercial traction. So we've been we did our first licensing deal last summer, and we're gonna look to do more in the next several quarters. It is a hand-holding process where standards are new. There is an education process. We have to tell people about our technology. But the benefit is we're pursuing larger individual deals. We're not necessarily going after small companies. Do tariffs impact BTQ? So I think environment for tariffs, and this was pretty obvious. My brother Olivier just visited the QPerfect team in France, and I think countries like France and others are all just doubling down on quantum in this environment. There is a lot of overlap with national security and quantum technology, just because can decrypt communications, but quantum will also be very useful for sensing and radar. And I think from what I'm seeing in the Trump administration, and we have an office in Portland, you're seeing technologies like quantum being prioritized. So I think ultimately it's a net positive for things like quantum. Terrific. I don't see any other questions. So thanks for the time, and feel free to. I'll just jump to the last slide here. Feel free to email us for any follow-up questions. Great. All right. Thank you.